There's a relatively niche internet meme from around 2011 that was meant to poke fun at the general public's lack of knowledge of video game characters. The meme, called "What if Zelda/Metroid was a girl?", plays on the phenomenon where people confuse the title of a work for the name of its main character. Zelda, for example, is the name of a game series featuring a male protagonist trying to rescue a princess named Zelda. Despite this, it wasn't unheard of to see people speculating about a possible future game where Zelda was a girl. Metroid is the name of a sci-fi video game franchise heavily inspired by the Alien films, the works of H.R. Giger, and anime such as Space Cobra, as well as the name of a species of parasitic alien within the games. The series' main character, Samus Aran, is a classic hero. Described in the manual as a cyborg who keeps the details of his identity a mystery, Samus dons futuristic power armor and pursues targets through dangerous, often hostile alien worlds. For players beating the original Metroid, released in 1986 in Japan, there was a secret award for beating the game with a fast enough completion time. In a moment that reverberates through pop culture to this day, the tiny sprite of Samus's power armor rapidly flashes and melts away to reveal a twist. Samus was a woman. The games following that original release have mostly focused on revisiting the 8-bit original's best gameplay elements: its sense of exploration across a seamless, sprawling singular world, its empowerment of the player through clever power-ups that serve both as better weaponry and keys for player progression, its challenging boss fights, and the boundaries of its sci-fi theme. Despite not being known for its deep story, however, many preceding pieces of Metroid media touched on Samus's femininity in unexpected ways. Samus is, at various points across the series, a reluctant mother, an innocent child, a twisted mockery of feminine ideals, and through all of those, more empowered each time. Her experience, especially in the newest main series title Dread, can be read as trans allegory. I aim to examine this, comparing Samus through the mainline 2D Metroid titles, with a focus on Fusion and those released after it, as well as behind-the-scenes details of her character's origins, through the lens of scholars such as Sarah Ahmed and Eve Sedgwick. The original Metroid was developed for the Famicom Disk System, an 8-bit computer released in the West as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. The game's hook was simple. You're Samus Aran, and he's the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. Go forth, explore this alien world, and shoot the bad guys. The truth of the matter is that by setting up Samus's male identity so thoroughly, the Japanese manual uses male pronouns for Samus 3 times on a page where the grammar of the language wouldn't have required any pronouns at all, and then leaving its true details for only the most dedicated players. Samus's femininity, her power armor, and the hidden depths of the series' lore had all become inextricably linked. Metroid 2 for the Game Boy follows up on this meta-level hook as promised. The bare-bones plot of the first game, as laid out in an opening crawl and the manual, established a few parties. The space pirates, led by Mother Brain, a horrific-looking melding of flesh and technology, the Galactic Federation, who hire bounty hunters like Samus to face threats like the pirates, and the Metroids, a parasitic, fast-replicating alien species that can be leveraged as bioweapons by whoever controls them. The first game had Samus kill Mother Brain and all of the Metroids in her possession. In this handheld sequel, Samus is sent to the home planet of the Metroids to exterminate them all. That's all the context given in this game. Execute every single member of this species of animals that are too terrible and destructive to be left alive. Without hesitation, Samus does so, killing Metroid after Metroid that are further and further along in their larval metamorphoses until she finally finds and kills the Queen Metroid. Having completed her mission, Samus leaves the now quiet room, but stumbles upon an egg, which hatches to reveal a baby Metroid. This Metroid is docile, not attacking Samus, but merely curiously hovering near her. Witnessing this, Samus disobeys orders, leaving it alive and taking it with her as she leaves the planet. This single act of mercy ripples out through the series, establishing a thematic link between Samus's femininity and the Metroid species. Future games, especially the notorious 2010 Wii game Metroid Other M, which, owing to its dubious placement in the series' canon, will not be discussed further in this essay, have taken Samus's relationship with the baby as dysfunctional yet maternal one. The most successful look at this relationship, though, is present in the critically acclaimed 1994 sequel, Super Metroid. Super Metroid, or Metroid 3, is perhaps one of the most influential games ever released. Alongside 1997's Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the PlayStation, It forms the blueprint for the ever-popular Metroidvania genre, usually defined as action-adventure games where players explore their environments for, quote, keys. These keys are then used to open new passages through familiar environments, but oftentimes also serve a dual purpose beyond just opening doors. To crib a great example of Metroidvania design from YouTube user Narelle,
this missile tank is a good example of how Metroid games are designed. Its placement out in the open misleads the player into thinking it might be easy to get, only for them to waste a minute of their time and leave disappointed. But the developers didn't do this just to be dicks. They knew that frustration would cause the player to remember this room, so that when they got the grapple beam, they'd be sure to come back and finally get the tank, and in turn, be led right into the wrecked ship, the next area of the game. In this way, the developer's unseen hand guides players through the world.
This series of, quote, locks and keys is the secret to Metroid game design. Some argue it was perfected here in Super. Future games in the series certainly have a mixed relationship with that design philosophy, though the indie game scene, countless developers have taken that design philosophy up for themselves, creating some of the most beloved games of the decade.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
The story of Super Metroid is almost stunningly similar to that of the original game, which is not lost on the developers. The games are said to both take place on the same planet, and subtle nods to the original are present throughout, from copying the awkward layout of the original 8-bit tile sets, fake-out boss fights, and certain deeply familiar room layouts. The only key difference is the sense of momentum from Metroid 2. Super Metroid begins with a monologued recap of the NES original, plus a synopsis of the final events of Metroid 2. This was fairly uncommon for the era. Handheld spin-off games usually didn't factor into the plot or development of the main series. Mario's Game Boy adventures, for example, were an entirely different sub-series of games dubbed Super Mario Land, with numbered sequels that didn't correspond with the numbering style of Super Mario's 1 through 4, and essentially their own continuity. Super Metroid, on the other hand, makes it exceptionally clear from the first moments of play that Metroid 2 is the inciting incident of this game. Where in the original Metroid, the manual implies that the space pirates got a singular Metroid by stealing it from Federation researchers, the opening to this game changes things. Yes, the space pirates once again steal a singular Metroid, the last Metroid, from Federation researchers, but those researchers got that Metroid because you gave it to them. The title crawl horrifyingly zooms in on the corpses of those lively researchers that you trusted. The last Metroid on the start screen hovers innocently in its capsule. When upon starting the game, you rushed back to the Ceres space station, the room where the Metroid was is now empty. You find it to be in the possession of Ridley, a flying dinosaur-like creature, and after a brief skirmish, the station begins self-destructing and you rush back to your ship, chasing Ridley down back to the planet where it all began. Following this intense cinematic intro, Super Metroid's story proceeds to take a back seat to the gameplay. The emergent storyline of the game isn't about Ridley or Mother Brain or Metroid specifically, so much as it is about Samus' personal journey of rediscovering the planet from Metroid 1, building herself back up by discovering new and familiar power-ups alike, and managing her relationships with the planet's dangers. The only thing the player really needs to do is find and kill Mother Brain, and the boss enemies that protect her lair. Metroid's story only really kicks back in following the Ridley fight. After defeating the monster that stole the baby Metroid, Samus proceeds through a hatch to find the capsule that had once contained the creature to be shattered and empty. Ridley's defeat usually marks the final boss that had sealed off the entrance to Mother Brain's lair, so most players head to the last area of the game, Torian. Traversing through Torian, players only encounter two types of living enemies, one of them being Metroids. Killing every one of the Metroids encountered is mandatory. The multiplicity of them imply that they're all clones of the baby Metroid. The unspoken question, what happened to the baby, is answered a few rooms in. While Torian is generally starkly metallic and clean, especially compared to all the other areas found across the game, Samus encounters rooms filled with dust and sand, as well as frozen, instantly disintegrating versions of some of the game's hardest enemies. The player quickly discovers the source, a member of the other living enemy type in Torian, a shockingly difficult to defeat variant of a random basic enemy type from earlier in the game, hops towards Samus, latched onto and drained of its energy by a gigantic, or, if you will, a Super Metroid, which finishes off its prey quickly. The enemy drains into another disintegrating husk, and the Super Metroid hovers for a second before grappling onto you. Nothing you do can defeat this monster, and it drains all of your health until you have 1 point of energy remaining before death. The Metroid unlatches from you, hovers around for a moment before flying away. This is the baby Metroid you saved. Look at it now, Samus. Look at what it's become. Following this revelation, Samus continues her progression through Torian. She literally has no choice in the matter. The door to go back to the rest of the planet has locked. All that's left to do is face off against Mother Brain once again. While the fight is initially one-to-one identical with that of the original version, hitting Mother Brain with enough missiles does not kill her. Instead, her head falls to the ground, the life support machinery we'd not seen her without up until this point falling away. And then, she gets back up. Mother Brain's truly grotesque hidden form is iconic. She drools and pulsates, her mechanical arms and legs looking no more unnatural than her fleshy body and skull. You try to defeat her, but to no avail. She's only gotten more powerful like this. Mother Brain unleashes a final multicolored attack, almost killing Samus once again, but at the last second, the baby Metroid swoops in and latches onto her head, draining her of energy. The baby transfers that energy to you, and you regain all of your health, but not before Mother Brain snaps back to life, pelting the Metroid with attacks that change its color from a healthy green to a sickly yellow. It flies away, presumably with the intent to repeat the original trick, but is killed at the last moment, and all of its energy transfers to Samus instead. This sacrifice gives Samus the power boost she needs to finally finish off Mother Brain for good, and her rainbow-colored attacks allow her to kill the monster quickly. In the tradition of all Metroid games, excepting the slow, peaceful ending of the second one, a time bomb is activated with the death of the final boss, and Samus quickly ascends out of the planet towards her spaceship, flying away triumphantly. Super Metroids on the series cannot be understated. This was Yoshio Sakamoto's first time as director on a Metroid project, which would directly lead to the position of series producer that he holds today. Its bold creative decision to directly continue the story of Metroid 2, centering the baby Metroid from that game's finale, would reverberate through the game's plot beats for years to come, including in the most recent entry, Dread. But this influence also has some drawbacks. Having such a critically acclaimed game be the new center of your franchise can lead game designers into a trap of just remaking that game over and over again. This is especially notable in the case of Super Metroid, which itself was already a remake of Metroid 1. An interview with Sakamoto in the Super Metroid Strategy Guide, released exclusively in Japan, seems to be concerned with the potential of a new entry feeling cyclical. When asked where the series will go from Super, Sakamoto says, "Think the series is basically finished. Metroids were basically destined to be exterminated in the first place, so I wanted to finish it in the most beautiful form." In order to feel fresh again, a new entry would need to deviate heavily from what came before. It would need to take the story of the Metroids, the Federation, and who Samus even is, and turn them all on their heads. This desire for change would stretch out even into the gameplay, which boldly refuted the power fantasy presented in Super with a feeling of helplessness and a struggle against authority. This would culminate in the next entry in the series, Metroid Fusion, released in 2002 for the Game Boy Advance. But the Super Metroid Strategy Guide features more than just an interview with Sakamoto. In the Secret of Super Metroid section, where this interview was found, there are two subsections. One segment features Samus describing a series of nightmares given to a real fortune teller for analysis and interpretation. The other half, where this Sakamoto interview comes from, contains shorter interviews with every single member of the development staff. Everyone was asked about fun things like their favorite games, films, and music, as well as a secret about Samus only they know. Perhaps the most infamous interview answer in Metroid history is given here. Hirofumi Matsuoka, who had contributed graphics for Super and the NES original, revealed the secret of Samus only he knew. Samus isn't a woman. As a matter of fact, Samus is actually The word Matsuoka used was made of two borrowed English words merged together. In Japan, it's a slur for trans women, usually specifically those who have not yet or do not wish to have a specific gender-confirming surgery. In usage and impact, there is a similar American slur for trans women. I don't feel the need to say it aloud either. Perhaps a comment like this was inevitable. The original NES game made such efforts to characterize Samus as male for the sake of making the end reveal more effective, that some gender confusion around the character would persist. In fact, some players of the NES original who didn't get the best ending, only the ending where Samus removed her helmet, thought that perhaps Samus was a man with long hair. It's fitting, then, that a member of the game's developers would use a transphobic slur to refer to her. Samus's womanhood is very well established by Super Metroid. There have been 3 games where she removes her heavy spacesuit as a reward for the skilled player, 2 games where her potential to be a mother to a child is relevant to the plot, and 1 game which begins with Samus flying to a space station named Ceres, named after the Roman goddess of, among other things, fertility and motherly relationships. Undeniably, Samus is a woman. Why then have so many trans and genderqueer fans of Metroid latched onto Samus as a possible example of transfeminine representation, when the only official word on the matter involves derogatory language? The answer is complex, multi-layered, and the plot of Metroid Fusion. 2002's Metroid Fusion marks many departures from the series' tradition. Returning to the handheld Game Boy line of systems instead of being on home console, Fusion takes a narrative-focused approach that many fans mark as a turning point of the mainline entries. Fusion launched alongside the 3D first-person Metroid Prime, developed by American company Retro Studios. Prime took a looser approach to Metroid canon and definitively set itself before even Metroid 2, so it will not be touched upon much more in this essay. But while Prime set about to bring the classic exploration power-up, lock-key Metroidvania formula into a 3D first-person perspective, Fusion stuck with 2D pixel art in the same side-scrolling action as ever due to mostly hardware limitations of the less powerful Game Boy Advance. This technical limitation allowed many other series which were having trouble in their transition to all-new 3D gameplay to make more games in their classic, tried-and-trusted 2D format. For Fusion, however, this allowed Sakamoto and his team the ability to comment directly on Super. In interviews, Sakamoto expressed that the 8-year gap between Super and Fusion was partially due just to how successful Super was. While it wasn't a sales juggernaut, the Metroid series never historically has been, with the exception of maybe Dread, trying to follow up such a critically acclaimed game was so intimidating a prospect that Nintendo once got turned down by an outside studio after Sakamoto declined to make a home console entry. Fusion, then, is an enigma. How do you compete with a masterpiece that came directly before you? Fusion says you don't. Metroid Fusion opens by tearing away many preconceptions of who Samus Aran even is. While accompanying a research team back on SR-388, the planet Metroid 2 takes place on, a creature on the planet's surface mutates into a floating gelatinous ball, which attacks Samus. This creature, soon to be known as the X-Parasite, slowly infests her nervous system, and emergency surgery is performed on Samus to try and save her life. But the surgery did not go as planned. As Samus puts it in her opening monologue, "It then came to light that the organic components of my power suit had become so integrated with my system that it could not be removed while I was unconscious. Large portions of my suit had to be surgically removed, dramatically altering my physical appearance. However, the X in my central nervous system were far too embedded to be removed safely. I was given a minimal chance of survival. Then, someone found a cure." Using a DNA sample from the research done on the baby Metroid, researchers with the Federation are able to create an anti-X vaccine, which is injected into Samus without delay. This kills all of the X in Samus' system, saving her life, but not without great consequences. As for me, one life ended, yet I survived, reborn as something different. Pondering this fact, I realize I owe the Metroid hatchling my life twice over. In its quest to break away from Super, including Samus' design, Fusion makes the extremely bold choice to permanently remove the distinction between Samus and her suit. The original manual for Metroid describes Samus as a cyborg, a being not quite human and not quite a machine. The reveal at the end of Metroid revoked that title from Samus. She was a woman, and the power suit was something she wore. Yes, she needed to wear it at all times during missions, and yes, the suit is more masculine than her true appearance. In order to protect herself from inherently hostile environments, Samus adopts this masculine persona, desired or not, as a method of survival. Trans femmes can probably relate. The cyborg has had an interesting relationship with gender studies since the 1985 essay, A Cyborg Manifesto, by feminist and postmodern scholar and professor Donna J. Haraway. In it, the cyborg is used as a model to illustrate a feminism that moves beyond the rigid boundaries of bodies as we understood them. The cyborg's existence is a call for coalitions beyond the Western ideal of groups like male or female. In the decades since, the paper has had countless reinterpretations, from feminist critique to extremely literal, technology-focused interpretations. Haraway herself has clarified that she doesn't wish to destroy masculinity or femininity entirely, as they are still meaningful constructs. However, as mandatory categories for identity, Haraway's conclusion is that they should be eliminated. As a cyborg herself, Fusion's Samus Aran has no choice in the matter. Fusion makes very clear the effect this change has upon Samus. Physically, she is lighter than ever before. For the first time in the series, she can grab and pull herself up onto ledges. The start of the game constantly reminds you of how vulnerable your new body is. While Metroid games always strip Samus of her previously acquired abilities for some reason or another, so the player can collect all of them once again, Fusion really wants to stress how vulnerable you are. Adam, an AI companion for Samus, guides you through the game's first areas while always reminding you of your low chance of survival without upgrades. You are no longer wearing a suit of protective armor. You are the suit. You are your own protection. This increased vulnerability, this removal of the separation between Samus Aran the woman and Samus Aran the bounty hunter, reflected in the almost genderless design of the suit, with Samus's iconic shoulder pads smoothed out into an androgynous, featureless chest, creates fascinating narrative potential that Sakamoto and his team seized upon. Fusion follows up on Super's singular monologue with a total of 8, an unprecedented insight into Samus's thoughts and feelings. Fusion peels away the external layer separating us from the true Samus, showing us a version of Samus who has nothing to hide, a Samus who is only able to exist thanks to a DNA infusion from the baby Metroid, now having saved her life twice over. Her ability to thrive in this new body is inextricable from her complex feelings on her femininity, fatalism, and body horror. I leave drawing the line from that sentence to the transfeminine experience as an exercise to the reader. This theme of a body that is not your own, about grappling with an identity that was assigned to you externally, extends to all 3 primary characters in Fusion. Many of Samus's monologues are about Adam, the AI found in the computer of her new Federation-provided ship. Barring the baby Metroid in the last minutes of Metroid 2, Samus has never had a companion on her adventures, nor been in contact with anyone beyond the mission briefings that the games begin with. Adam's presence marks a change for the series. Every time Samus enters a new area, she must be briefed by Adam before the door to progress unlocks. Samus remarks that the blunt, computerized CO reminds her of a previous commanding officer she'd had. He called me lady on missions. From anyone else, it would have sounded sarcastic, but Adam Malkovich made it sound dignified. Out of respect, and with some irony, I named the computer after him. The AI version of Adam is revealed to be based on an upload of Adam Malkovich prior to his fatal sacrifice. Neither Adam nor Samus are aware of this origin. Only when Samus accidentally refers to the AI by his name does he begin to remember his past. Adam confirms his identity at the end of this conversation by referring to Samus as Lady. Though this conversation is short, it reveals that the AI also grapples with some of the same conflicts as Samus. Adam's name thematically resonates with Samus's gender confusion. Adam, of course, is the first human, whose body is separated later by God into man and woman. In his birth, Adam is neither. This is mirrored in inverse with Samus, whose titular fusion of her suit and her body, her femininity and masculinity, is an implicit rejection of the human birth-only genders, like in Haraway's essay on the cyborg. Adam's last name, Malkovich, also highlights this. The "vich" ending for last names usually means son of. His gender is tied to his birth state of body and his legal name, neither of which he has as an AI. He isn't Malkovich, son of a father, and he isn't even truly Adam, except through his own determination as such. His last name is left behind with his body. Samus and Adam both reflect a kind of textual trans experience. Neither of them have bodies that are inherently gendered male or female, yet both choose to identify with their true selves. Samus, only when she finally finds a familiar friend buried deep below Federation regulation, is Lady again. Adam, the computer, is not referred to by any pronouns until his reclamation of his past, where he is finally referred to as he by Samus. The third primary character in Fusion perhaps reflects these themes best of all. The SAX is a beautiful and terrible thing. Games have engaged the literary classic trope of the doppelganger for decades. As a method of presenting a foil for a player character, it works excellently. Inspired in one of its earliest gaming appearances by Peter Pan wrestling with his shadow, dark or shadow versions of characters have been a persistent staple in games ever since Zelda 2. 2004's Metroid Prime 2 actually features a fairly standard interpretation of the trope in that game's antagonist, Dark Samus, but I argue the SAX perfected the concept 2 years earlier. Made from the X-parasite merged with the remains of Samus' suit, the SAX is Metroid Fusion's main visible antagonist. The SAX caused the X breakout on the station. The SAX hunts you across multiple sections of the ship. The SAX is, as Samus puts it, a killing machine. The design of the SAX reflects a more masculine depiction of the power armor than ever shown before. Samus' iconically large armored shoulders are highlighted in key art and sprite work for the SAX, a masculine trait that the Fusion suit lacks, a literal weight off Samus' shoulders. The SAX is Samus Aran, and you are not. The SAX looks more like you than you do. Equipped with all of Samus' most iconic abilities from Super, the SAX has a single goal: finding and killing the biggest threats to the existence of the species. X-parasites in the game are shown willing to sacrifice themselves for this purpose. One who assimilates a crew member attempts to destroy the entire space station because doing so could take Samus' life. The Metroids, as perfect biological predators of the X, are a big enough threat that the SAX almost dies attempting to destroy a few. It is no surprise, then, that Samus Aran tries to kill a Metroid. She's done so for 3 games already. The only difference is that in Fusion, you're not playing as Samus. You're playing as the Metroid. The emergent queerness in this concept is boundless from the queer gameplay formula. You must run and hide instead of being the one who chases in tense, explicit horror sequences that begin the series' experiment with player powerlessness, to the reframing of Samus herself as the horror movie monster attacking a spaceship. The SAX, as Samus, invokes the shapeshifter trope from works like John Carpenter's The Thing. She may look normal, the way you've always known her, but deep underneath she could be something else, something dangerous, a threat to the Federation. While this form of the shape-shifting imposter, especially in explicitly sci-fi settings, can be traced back to John Carpenter's 1982 film The Thing, the trope was broadly initially popularized by the 1954 film Invasion of the Body Snatchers and the original 1951 The Thing from Another World. These films arguably resonated so strongly with audiences due to the contemporaneous anti-communist and anti-queer McCarthyist moral panics. The American public was convinced of the inhumanity of the communist and the queers who sympathized with them. Science fiction, then, reflected those fears back, creating shape-changing monsters with familiar faces but unfamiliar ideologies. The SAX, then, as well as the imposter from the hit indie game Among Us, have strong queer lineages. The actual Samus is no less horrific and no less queer. Both the SAX and Samus can be said to echo Frankenstein's monster. Brought to, though unlike Frankenstein's monster, not past the brink of death, she could only exist as something forever other, her body given new life through science. The bodily recontextualization Samus must engage with in Fusion can be deeply relatable for transgender people. Unsurprisingly, trans fans of Shelley's work have written extensively about reclaiming Frankenstein for its unintentional, yet resonant trans symbolism. The SAX, then, is the pop culture Frankenstein, the monster without a heart. Alive only through gross misuse of science, the SAX is purely a destructive force. If it helps an innocent, it is only in the context of destroying something else. The SAX is Frankenstein, but so is Samus. The SAX is a monster. The SAX is Samus Aran. The SAX is othered from itself. Samus is a monster. Samus is not the unfamiliar Samus Aran. Samus is herself. Samus is a walking violation of the societal boundaries of what bodies can be. Samus is a threat. The SAX wants only to survive. The SAX wants to grow into something more than itself. The SAX has empty eyes. The SAX is a threat. The SAX is capable of critical thought. The SAX is silent. The SAX is violent. The SAX is the potential end of the universe. The SAX is potentially exploitable for the Federation's gain. Samus talks back. Both, in my opinion, are deeply queer. Parallels and reflecting lines between Samus and the X can be drawn forever. Any of the X are able to download information from computers, making them a form of cyborg like Samus. The X gain abilities from their environment, just like Samus does. The X have a confusing and complex relationship with gender, just like Samus. The game's script makes it a point of this through pronoun usage, just like it did for Samus and Adam. Adam takes great care to never refer to any of the X with it pronouns, with the singular exception of a line whose language is implied to be influenced by the Federation. On the contrary, Samus's early monologue on the SAX uses the it pronoun almost deliberately, for a total of 6 times in 7 sentences. While she struggles to accept her new self, she resorts to demonizing her past. Despite the SAX having no more abilities than Samus once had herself, she refers to the X as a potential threat to the universe. On a personal note, dealing with this early transition self-hostility is something I've seen a lot in my community and even in myself. There's this desire to compensate for the pain of years lost, and so often we tell ourselves that who we were in the past was wrong in a way simply beyond which gender identity is presented to the world. I can recall seeing many posts online where trans women demonize, for example, testosterone as this rage chemical, this thing that turns girls into monsters. The SAX is me, only heartless, a killing machine. This doesn't go anywhere positive. Not only from the obvious falsehood of testosterone being inherently evil, which has been leveraged as a medical gatekeeping method against transmasculine people, not to mention its racist usage against, for example, cis women of color in sports, but from a perspective of self-love. Samus hates the X. She thinks there is no redemption for them, that they are endlessly dangerous and must be destroyed before they even reproduce. And yet her body, even all the way up to the final chat with Adam, was permanently shaped by the X. She cannot destroy the X and everything on the station that they have touched without destroying herself, too. If not for the support of Adam, this was her plan. She would have rather died. The computerized Adam, of course, sees right through this. You know that detonating this station in high orbit would not guarantee the complete extinction of the X-parasites, even though the station would be utterly destroyed. You would only succeed in removing the one obstacle to the galaxy's ruin: yourself. Thanks to the conventions of the video game power fantasy, Adam is able to propose an alternate method of destroying the X, which he disobeys Federation protocol to help accomplish. In real life, destroying the negative effects of gender isn't as simple as crashing a space station down onto gender's home planet, but Samus sets out to do so anyway. She is stopped only by one final encounter with the SAX. This fight is short and it is brutal. When the SAX's health is low, its form fizzles and fades with the same graphical effect as every other enemy in the game, but before it reverts back into its original X-parasite form to be safely defeated, the SAX mutates horrifically. It grows, limbs splitting and multiplying, its chest bursts open into a mouth and a tongue lolls to the ground. It has many eyes and many mouths and too many arms and legs. This monster, though, is still colored orange and yellow, and still clearly prominently displays Samus's visor and its skull. The SAX, even in this form, is still you, still a reflection of some part of yourself. As an aside on a detail of this transformation, there's a transphobic horror trope found in some Japanese media where, when a female monster transforms into a new, more horrifying form, she reveals some kind of, quote, terrifying beast under her skirt. The low-hanging tongue of the beastly SAX, attention to which is grabbed by more frames of animation for it than any other part of the SAX's body, may fall in line with this, though I can't say for sure if it was the intent. This new form of the SAX goes down quick, and the X reverts into its, quote, core X form. Previous Metroid games featured health and ammo refills in the form of inexplicable item drops that suspended themselves in midair before being collected, a la coins in Mario. In Fusion, killing an enemy makes it revert to its, quote, parasitic form, where Samus can absorb it for health or ammunition. Killing and absorbing bosses gives Samus power-ups. Samus defeats the core X, but before she can absorb it, for the first time in the game it flies away, and we're left alone to complete our mission. In series tradition, activating the control panel and setting the space station to crash down onto the planet causes a timer to begin counting down, and Samus must quickly escape the space station, mirroring the ending of every prior Metroid, as well as the escape from Ceres in Super Metroid's intro sequence. Fusion isn't just satisfied with this, however. Calling back to the ending of Metroid 2, Samus is confronted by an adult, fully mature Metroid, though this Metroid is an escaped clone from the Secret Federation laboratory encountered earlier in the game. Samus is unable to even damage the parasite, and is brought down to 1 point of energy, much like in Super's finale. From here, the sequence is familiar. The final boss is stopped by the surprise reappearance of a violent ally that had once fought Samus, and said ally is promptly killed. Samus's energy is replenished by merging with that of her deceased ally, and the boss monster is destroyed once and for all. Of course, the difference here is that the boss monster is an overgrown Metroid, not your ally. This swap, then, would put the SAX in the role of Mother Brain, despite being Samus, a concept I'm not very keen on discussing in this essay beyond stating that Metroid Other M took that idea and ran with it. Fusion's for the final boss only beam isn't the same kind of instant death, pride-colored rainbow laser of doom that the Hyper Beam was. Instead, it's Samus's Ice Beam, an ability which was ubiquitous in Super and completely absent from Samus's Fusion moveset. The reasoning is that this beam, so effective against Metroids, would hurt Samus too. Now though, having achieved a kind of balance with the SAX inside of her, Samus is able to wield the Ice Beam and kill the Metroid, boarding her ship and leaving. Fusion leaves Samus's future ambiguous. She monologues about the potential fallout of the game's events. My incredible reunion with Adam may have saved the universe. But how will the beings of the universe view our resolve? I doubt they will understand what we did, the danger we barely averted. They will hold tribunals and investigations. They will hold us responsible. Adam understood this, and he spoke to me in my anger. Do not worry. One of them will understand. One of them must. I have reflected upon his words, and I see the wisdom in them. We are all bound by our experience. They are the limits of our consciousness. But in the end, the human soul will ever reach for the truth. This is what Adam taught me. Here Samus echoes philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, who spoke of the limits of language aligning with the limits of his world. Queer experience so often is limited by knowledge. Without words for our experiences, organizing our thoughts into an identity is nearly impossible. My own transness was just an indescribable, vast source of distress before suddenly I discovered the tools to describe it. From then, exploring my gender identity didn't seem quite so impossible or isolating. I grew and gained strength, even if merely linguistically. Samus gets the privilege to build up super speed when she gains new tools. Both open new doors for us. The lock and key system of the Metroidvania, then, can reflect Eve Cedric's closet. The act of finding a new way through the game, another coming out. Only by confronting the parts of herself she hates the most is Samus finally able to wear orange and yellow again. The SAX gives her the strength to face the cold, and she does so with grace. It's not quite the same as Super. Unlike the baby Metroid, the SAX gives no indication that it's fighting the Omega Metroid because it wishes to help Samus specifically. It could be acting in accordance with the time it ignored Samus to kill Metroids from earlier in the game. The Omega Metroid is barely foreshadowed in Fusion, unlike Mother Brain's detailed foreshadowing in Super. Though, arguably both instances of foreshadowing only succeed with the player's knowledge of game imagery from 2 numbered entries ago. The Omega Metroid is also not a specifically hostile force who remembers and hates Samus. While this is true, the Omega Metroid also didn't come from nowhere, and could be a final piece of unlocking Samus's arc leading into Metroid 5. Fusion establishes that the Metroid DNA kept on hand by the Federation came from samples taken from the baby between 2 and Super. This was used for Samus's Metroid vaccine, which had completely infused itself with her DNA. Additionally, it was used for cloning. Knowing of the shared DNA between the two, the act of killing the Omega Metroid then becomes darkly recontextualized as a kind of filicide. As a direct clone of the baby, the Omega Metroid can be viewed as a dark representation of Samus's feelings on the creature. Without Samus, the baby grew to adulthood, pupating into the very thing she spent a whole game hunting and killing, perhaps reinforcing the guilt later played up in Other M. Killing the Metroid as her fully united self, then, is a triumph over these fears. The Omega Metroid is the only enemy to die without revealing some kind of X-parasite form, instead being destroyed utterly. Samus does not absorb the Omega Metroid. It is of no use to her to remain stuck in the could-have-beens. This absorption belies a dark irony throughout the whole of Fusion. Despite the incredible abilities Samus is constantly able to gain, there is one just out of reach. The ability ubiquitous to X, to change shape on a whim, is utterly lost to Samus. She may have her orange and yellow colors back by the end of the game, but Samus is still just as trapped in her beautiful, powerful, fucked up body as the rest of us. Fusion's interest in examining and rejecting the cycles of Metroid, though powerfully done with the SAX, still meant a lack of escape for the series. Holding a mirror, even to critique, still reflects the image back. There's a Torian-like secret lab, a sector meant to replicate the environment of SR-388, and the specific centering of whatever legacy characters they could scrape together. Ridley's fight serves no purpose than to answer fan demands for another Ridley fight, despite his death in Super. The Edakuns and Dakuras, two species of creature who helped Samus in wordless tutorials back in Super, are given significant narrative attention. An entire monologue from Samus, as well as the final lines of dialogue, are dedicated to them. These specific creatures are even implied to be the exact same ones from an Easter egg at the end of Super. How unusual to meet again here, indeed. This slavish fixation on the past doesn't end, and didn't start, with Fusion. The next game in the series, Zero Mission, is a direct remake of Metroid 1. Certain problems that had been building up come to a head in that game. Fusion and Zero Mission released within 2 years of each other, the quickest turnaround of a new 2D Metroid to date. Though omitted in Fusion's Western release, both games included bonus imagery, unlocked upon completion, taken from a 2003 manga. This manga, titled simply Metroid, is an adaptation of an adaptation. Its plot and characters echo a 1994 Super Metroid comic released in Nintendo Power magazine. The Super comic included, for the first time, details on Samus's origins. These origins would be canonized in the 2003 manga. Zero Mission is a Metroid 1 remake, but it is also a retelling, an attempt at keeping the franchise consistent at any cost to itself. While later games' influence on its elements are clear, the movement feels similar to Fusion, with a power grip item replicating that game's ledge grab, and the overall design is clearly inspired by Super, such as Samus getting a face-revealing opening monologue. It is the 2003 manga where much of the game's most unique aspects, for better or worse, originate. For the sake of Samus's character, the manga features a few key elements that completely recontextualize many things taken for granted in Metroid's lore. Zero Mission has a few contradictory assumptions about the player going in. It assumes this is your first Metroid and grabs you by the hand, pointing out where you need to go before you've even had a chance to think about it. It assumes you've been a fan since the '86 original, so that it can smugly subvert what you think is going to happen based on your prior knowledge. The moment that cemented the series' trajectory, the Samus reveal, is the exact antithesis of Zero Mission's intentions. Samus Aran isn't a cyborg who keeps his identity a mystery. She's a woman, and you knew that going in, so we might as well show you her delicately lashed eyes in the first seconds of the game. This isn't an alien planet for you, and thus it isn't an alien planet for her either. The familiarity she possesses with the planet in Super came not just from exploring it in Metroid 1, but from living there her entire life. And the ancient statues, gifters of Samus's items, named initially as Cho-Zo, bird statue, morphed into the Chozo, an ancient, powerful race of bird-like humanoids with advanced technology. The Super Metroid comic reveals that the Chozo are also responsible for raising Samus, having used their technology to give her superhuman strength via an infusion of Chozo DNA. Samus is effectively a member of their species. Thus, the Chozo statues recognize her as a sort of sacred heir. She's given not just an item or an energy refill, but a blinking red map telling her where to go next, placed over an image seemingly meant to evoke Egyptian hieroglyphs. The feeling of it exploring an unknowable vanished civilization is gone. You are instead their chosen one, here to reconquer your homeland. It's not necessarily a bad change, it's just different. The new relationships between Samus and the various parties in Metroid are also reinforced in the 2003 manga. Samus doesn't have ties to just the Chozo. The manga also takes from the Super Metroid comic the narrative choice that Ridley is Samus's sworn enemy because he killed her parents, twisting the rivalry which had once escalated its stakes naturally thanks to growing player fixation on the dragon game to game, into an absurd Batman-like revenge cycle. Mother Brain, too, is given a personal tie to Samus. The manga declares that the Chozo are responsible for creating her. And Samus's childhood with the Chozo took place against a backdrop of the computer slowly trying to take over the planet they both live on. Planet Zebes. The same planet as Metroid 1 and Super. Samus is now, in the grand tradition of spacefaring prequels released in the mid-2000s, personally connected to every single party of note in the galaxy. The most important parts of the new lore, the parts which actually have to do with my analysis, will be expanded upon in this essay when the games use their imagery, so unfortunately this is the last we'll see of the hamburger-eating Chief Hardy. Sorry, man. Zero Mission is primarily a remake of Metroid 1, taking the exact story concept of that first game and placing you in the same world, facing the same bosses with the exact same powers. But while Zero Mission is primarily a remake of Metroid 1, it also contains a bonus epilogue, the eponymous Zero Mission. Instead of triumphantly defeating Mother Brain and flying off into the sunset, Samus's ship is shot down by pirates, the crash rendering her power suit unusable, and she must make her way through their mothership and find a way to survive while almost entirely defenseless. This epilogue, too, is a partial result of the series' fascination with itself. A 1986 Japan-only choose-your-own-adventure book featured a similar post-Mother Brain pirate ship that Samus must fight her way through. Perhaps, though, the most interesting source of inspiration for the Zero Mission may come from Metroid 1 itself. The Samus reveal, where players see Samus for the first time as an identifiable woman, came with a bonus New Game Plus. By immediately starting the game over, players would be granted all upgrades gained in the previous go-around, including the ability to ditch the power suit and play in just the leotard from the reveal. As an aside, this alternate costume was also available by inputting the phrase Justin Bailey into the password save data system, which by chance is read by the game's code as a save file with near-complete items. The leotard is dubbed by many fans as the Justin Bailey suit. Zero Mission takes the opportunity to canonize Samus's undersuit appearance. Rather than Super and Fusion's sports bra and shorts, a nod to the best ending outfit for Metroid NES, Zero Mission creates the Zero Suit, a form-fitting spandex superhero suit which, in common with the best ending outfit, leaves me with a bit of bad taste in my mouth, at least the way it's drawn in this game. I think it goes unstated that aspects of Samus's suitless design were driven by the developers trying to reach for male sex appeal. The Zero Suit, especially in the cutscene that kicks off the Zero Mission, is emphasizing that same thing in what feels to me like a regressive step back from Fusion. This is luckily a problem restricted mostly to its cutscenes. During gameplay, Zero Suit Samus is only about 16 by 40 pixels, meaning the camera can't really sexualize her even if it wanted to. Instead, the Zero Mission uses this vulnerability, this soul sequence where Samus lacks the protective layer of masculinity that she used her whole career, to present gameplay and thematic concepts that follow up Fusion and set up Metroid Dread fairly brilliantly. The first half of the Zero Mission feels like an experiment following up the early feeling of powerlessness players had when facing off against the SAX in Fusion. Samus lacks all of the abilities she gained through the journey. While she keeps her health upgrades, her weaponry is limited to a single pistol. She can't kill any of the space pirates that she'd been able to blast away without a thought before. She instead has to stealth around them, a gameplay concept explored in Fusion only in brief moments. Hiding in corners and behind walls, Zero Mission slows itself down considerably as you make your way carefully through the ship. Samus crawls, after 20 years of not being able to, through vents and pipes and eventually reaches the Chozo ruins. Marked by the game's map as secret, the ruins are still filled with the same pirates, the gameplay remaining fairly similar to the ship until Samus reaches the area's boss. The fight and cutscenes that follow center Samus's crisis of identity more directly than perhaps any other moment in this series. It is this fight, alongside Dread's existence, that made me want to write this essay. The moment Samus enters the room, a cutscene plays. Fading from the color of the present to the black and white of the past, it is revealed that Samus visited these ruins as a child, accompanied by one of her bird dads. Samus does canonically have multiple Chozo fathers, which is a point for queer representation. Her wide-eyed child self fades and becomes her adult Zero Suit representation, and she stares at the ruins. A representation of an armored Chozo is etched into the wall, the same kind of massive shoulder pads Samus wears in every other game in the series, excepting Fusion and Metroid 1, are prominently featured. Chozo holds a mirror, reflecting Samus as she is in the Zero Suit. In video game fashion, the image projected on the mirror glows and starts floating around the room, still mirroring Samus perfectly. The player must shoot the phantom image a total of 4 times. The challenge lies in the fact that if Samus's gun is facing left, the reflection of Samus is facing right, and the mirror Samus's attack is going to hit you. This mechanic was patented for some reason. The doppelganger fight from Fusion cannot get more literal than right here. You must defeat the version of yourself you see in the mirror, the version of yourself you've been expected to be. Upon defeat, the phantom image returns to sit inside of the mirror, and instead displays Samus wearing a new armor. In a cutscene derivative of Magical Girl anime, Samus is transformed into this new, ultimate version of herself. All of her weapons and armor return, in addition to the power-up unlocking items from later games like the Space Jump and Plasma Beam. Samus feels in this moment like her truest self. A remixed Brinstar theme, the theme played in the first area of the first Metroid game, triumphantly toots through the GBA sound system, and players easily devastate the same Zabishians that caused so much trouble the first time through this area. Then it's off to the final boss, another Ridley fight, the second in the game, this time against a robotic clone of the dinosaur for some reason. Traditional escape sequence, and that's Zero Mission. The Ruins Test boss fight, as named by an official strategy guide, is thematically about a resolution of identity, trans allegory or no. With knowledge of the manga and other external media, the fight seems to be about Samus' relationship with the Chozo. By defeating her powerless human self, she ascends into the Chozo warrior she was always meant to be. On the other hand, overlooking gender here feels impossible to me. The Zero suit is almost sickeningly hyper-feminine. While wearing it, many of the traits that make Samus such an iconic character are absent. Gone is the outlier of the NES era, the physically capable woman who could take on anything or anyone all on her own. Gone is the mystery of her design, too. The opportunity for gender confusion is thrown out alongside the power suit in order to make room for another gratuitous close-up of Samus's behind. She instead joins the endless ranks of female comic book space warriors who wear what the publisher thinks will excite male audiences. Nintendo was not doing this as an unintentional accident, by the way. They were fully cognizant of how sexually provocative some of those close-ups were. The Japanese release of Metroid Fusion contained a child mode, which changed the way text was displayed for the sake of younger readers. This mode also replaced the ending pin-up-style posters from the adult mode with images depicting Samus reminiscing on events detailed in the manga. Her best ending outfit is only visible in one image, and is totally desexualized. The series has never had the best extra-canonical relationship with Samus' female sexuality. It is in Zero Mission where the cutscenes finally reflect that. Fighting a literal mirror, though, is extremely powerful trans allegory. Countless indie works have used mirror selves to explore a character's relationship with gender, such as J.C. McCrae's Pact novels or the video game Celeste. The mirror, too, has a relationship with horror. Vampires come immediately to mind, though there are countless horror films with a mismatched mirror moment. What's truly horrifying for Samus, though, is that the mirror shows her exactly as she is. It's been a noted phenomenon that in some cases, if an individual's appearance causes gender misidentification from the outside, that individual then performs a more exaggerated version of their own gender, as a sort of pre-translation for the external world. Samus was thought of as a man in her suit, but you can't make that mistake anymore. See how hyper-feminine she is? See how you can still walk around and move as her in-game? She's the Samus you know, but now it's easier for you. Misidentification has been made successfully impossible, and all it cost was Samus's entire identity. Only through the act of killing the Phantom, of reclaiming who she wanted to be as a child, does Samus cease her performance. She's herself again, and while you might be confused about what she is under the armor, she's not confused whatsoever. She's Samus Aran, bounty hunter, and her work here is done. See you next mission. But that next mission would take a long, long time to come around. In 2016, over a decade after the release of Zero Mission, Nintendo finally announced that they were working with Spanish developers Mercury Steam to create a remake of Metroid 2. Mercury Steam were already intimately familiar with the Vania part of Metroidvania, having worked with Castlevania publishers and Hideo Kojima, of all people, to bring that series into 3D. Reportedly, the studio had tried to pitch a home console remake of Metroid Fusion to Nintendo, but was turned down. Sakamoto was impressed, though, and hired Mercury Steam to make that aforementioned Metroid 2 remake. Released in 2017 as Metroid Samus Returns for the Nintendo 3DS, the game was mostly well received. I won't discuss it in detail here, mainly because I haven't played it, but suffice to say, Nintendo was comfortable enough with their work to hand over the ability to make Metroid 5 to them.
Entering the atmosphere in T-10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Metroid Dread was, for the longest time, an utter enigma to fans. Rumors were rampant about the game since at least 2005 when it was leaked by a gaming magazine. In a recent interview, Sakamoto clarified that he wanted to expand upon the stealth horror gameplay found in the GBA games, but didn't feel that the Nintendo DS, which would have been the target system for the game, had the hardware to handle the mechanics. Then 2010's Other M came out, and the overwhelmingly negative fan reception scared Nintendo away from the series for years. It was only after the release of Samus Returns was enough trust built up between the two studios for the game to be revisited. While it's not quite the Fusion remake the team had pitched half a decade ago, getting instead to make Fusion's legendarily lost direct sequel has to be a pretty good second-place prize. It was revealed in June of 2021 and came out less than 4 months later on October 8th to extremely warm critical and commercial success. And yeah, the game is good. It's really good. It might be my favorite Metroid. It's certainly the only one I immediately replayed all the way through upon beating it, and then played a third time, just for kicks. The build up to the release of Dread is why I played Zero Mission, and my desire to better understand Dread led me to play the rest of the series too. Dread is the first console 2.5D game in the series, 2.5D being a term used colloquially to refer to a game with full 3D art and 2D side-scrolling gameplay. While Samus Returns also used polygons, the effect was not as successful as it could have been due to the limitations of the handheld. Dread blows those limitations apart, with the most excellently characterized Samus yet. Her body language tells us everything we need to know. The game agrees, removing Fusion's internal monologues from the formula entirely. Some speculate that this change was made in response to the reception of Other M's many fully voiced monologues, but either way, not having Samus stop to think aloud keeps an extremely strong sense of rhythm to the game's pace. Much like Fusion, Dread contains more than a few queerings of the Metroid formula. For example, you don't start at the top of the planet next to your ship and work your way down. The goal of the game, instead, is for Samus to work her way all the way up to the surface, where her ship lies patiently in wait. Adam returns in this game, though his waypoint markers do not. Dread's basic power suit follows up from the Fusion suit with an extremely unique biomechanical flair, and, of course, the experiments with stealth gameplay from Zero Mission and Fusion finally reach their final form as the Emmy Zones. Dread's reveal and marketing focused primarily on the Emmy, and for good reason. They're terrifying when you first meet them. Moving extremely quickly and violently, they can kill Samus in one hit. Much like the SAX or even the Ruins test, the MA are another reflection of Samus's relationship with her femininity. Beyond their feminine name, the Emmy, of which there are 7, have graceful, lithe bodies moving smoothly from action to action, high-pitched chirping accompanying. The thing that sets the Emmy apart from prior mirrors of Samus, though, is the fact that they're robots, nothing more. They pursue you, they hunt for you, they kill you with a metal probe jammed into your chest, all without a specific opinion of you. They turn their spines 180 degrees and skitter up and down walls. They emit high-pitched chirps loudly and constantly, not for communication, but for mere navigation. They can crawl through gaps. They are incapable of empathy. They cannot be defeated by any of Samus's weaponry. They are just machines. They are what Samus fears she could one day become. It isn't an unreasonable fear for the bounty hunter. The events of Fusion had Samus's DNA permanently overwritten by a different species, her body forever a fusion between a suit of mechanized armor and whatever the Federation could retrieve of her human body after its mutation. What if in the future another horrific thing goes wrong and all that's left is a robot? The visual design of the Emmy reflects this fear. When standing, they clearly resemble Samus's power suit. They don't care who or what you are, they just want to kill their assigned target. The feminine design of the Emmy also somewhat echoes Samus in the Zero suit. Only while in touch with this hyper-feminine performance do the Emmy and Samus gain the ability to crawl. The Emmy aren't technically the main antagonists of the game. Rather, they were just reprogrammed by the true villain. The inciting incident of Dread is video footage of a living X-parasite surfacing on a planet called ZDR. Realizing the threat, 7 Emmy, developed by a random military robotics company, are deployed by the Federation. Purpose-built to, quote, extract DNA from large field samples, end quote, and armed with, quote, incredible mobility and protective plating, end quote, the Emmy, of course, all vanish from communications not long after arriving. Samus, despite Adam, now fully voiced by a text-to-speech engine, warning her against the risk, heads to ZDR herself, and is very quickly attacked by the game's true villain. She must once again collect all of her upgrades, old and new, while trying to survive and escape back to her ship. Of course, the plot has its twists and turns, but it's all deeply enjoyable from a video game context. Samus finds out that to defeat the Emmy, she has to first destroy its central unit. This act lets Samus absorb its energy, powering up her blaster and allowing her to destroy each Emmy's outer shell before finishing it off with a charged shot to its exposed eyeball-like core. These two fights carry great thematic resonance. The central unit is initially just a floating metallic orb thing, but sharp-eyed players might recognize the rings of fire surrounding it to be identical to those found in the fight with Mother Brain. When still armored, the central unit also resembles Mother Brain's drone from the 2003 manga, though of course the most obvious connection comes when the armor is destroyed, revealing the central unit to just be another smaller Mother Brain, complete with a single giant cartoon eye. Then skipping ahead to another resonant moment, Samus blowing the armor off of the Emmy. Upon having its core exposed, the Emmy slows down to a shamble, evoking the Frankenstein imagery of fusion. The final shot knocks the Emmy over dead. The Emmy aren't X-parasites, but upon defeating an Emmy, Samus kneels down near the robot, watching as it dissolves into mysterious voxels and absorbs a power-up from her downed foe. She absorbs the Emmy into her, one way or another, a microcosm of her final moments with the SAX. In a way, the Emmy fights feel like another instance of Samus dealing with her own internalized transphobia. The Emmy are programmed to do one thing: extract the DNA of Samus Aran. This unending obsession with the details of the DNA of trans people can be found in today's media all of the time. Discussions about chromosomes still somehow dominate many extremely high-profile discourses, sometimes even in places of government power. The Emmy don't care who or what Samus is. She's a woman, she saved the world, she's on the same side as them, all they care about is that one detail. They will kill her to get it, and she cannot scratch them with her usual arsenal. It's a repeated nightmare of an impossible battle. The film grain effect that the Emmy zones have helps to add an otherworldly surreality to the experience. Only by re-defeating Mother Brain, by reaffirming her strength and killing off the face of the trauma of her youth as established by the 2003 manga, can Samus finally defeat an Emmy, permanently regaining strength because of this. When the Emmy is killed and the lights turn on, film grain effect eliminated in that zone permanently, it's a sobering moment. Dread, though, isn't the first time the Metroid series uses nightmares to explore Samus' psyche. For that, we must turn back to the infamous Super Metroid Player's Guide, the same Japan-only guidebook that contained the Hirofumi Matsuoka quote on Samus' secret. Luckily, this section is much more straightforwardly fun. Ariadne Yuko is a real-life professional Japanese astrologer and fortune teller. The team behind this guidebook gave Yuko a series of Samus's recurring nightmares to divine, and the fortune teller analyzed them with a charming amount of deadly sincerity. The first nightmare has Samus be unable to turn off her speed booster, a dream Yuko divines to be caused by cabin fever. She prescribes the bounty hunter to exercise more. Another dream features Samus getting sick to her stomach when absorbing the power of the baby Metroid. Yuko tells the galactic hero to drink some ginger ale before bed. However, accepting those two, Yuko analyzes every single other nightmare to have some relationship with Samus's gender identity. Great minds and all that, I suppose. In response to a nightmare where Samus is trapped in her morph ball, Yuko boldly opens by stating, quote, "If we explain this in the style of Freud, the ball should represent the male sex organ." The fortune teller is able to divine, then, that Samus feels confined by some aspect of biological masculinity. Either, according to Yuko, Samus is having an affair with a man, which can't be true considering a 1986 manga from before the first game's release depicts Samus very much attracted to women. Or there is a second interpretation. As Yuko put it, "If this isn't the case, this dream is important. The will of the universe is urging you to be cautious. This dream means in the near future you may be trapped in thousands of dead ends, unsure what to do. And I suggest using trial and error. Take independent advice for each problem. Don't mourn for the extermination of the space pirates. Take a restful retreat on a colony somewhere." This quote is genuinely one of the most perfect explanations of the transition experience I've ever seen. It is a series of 1,000 dead ends, but with help from those around you, they each can be overcome. Transphobia will one day be defeated. In the meantime, practice self-care as much as possible. Samus will, as Yuko correctly identified, one day resolve the claustrophobic feeling that the, quote, male sex organ causes her. The on-the-nose details don't end here. Another response from Yuko psychoanalyzes the gendered symbolism of Samus's Chozo DNA. The nightmare she analyzes is about failing Super Metroid's wall jump tutorial, a part of the game that actually stumped me personally, among, I assume, countless other players. Yuko ascribes this to Samus metaphorically attempting to escape her body. The Chozo implanted you with their DNA, granting you these abilities. However, you didn't really want to have your abilities. Those, in other words, are male powers. You lost your female ego, but didn't want to have the physical abilities of men. From this, a trans reading of Samus's Chozo DNA can arise fairly naturally. As a child, Samus needed to physically alter her body. She wanted to no longer possess the, quote, physical abilities of men. The Chozo used their DNA infusion technology to help Samus achieve this. The trans symbolic potential in a young Samus requesting a literal DNA change right before hitting puberty is very strong. Yuko also states that if Samus got a second, presumably Chozo, DNA infusion, it would have male symbolism to it. This line, alongside a different dream, both have strong ties to Metroid Dread's main villain. Samus describes a dream in which she collects a new item from a Chozo, who then crushes her with its fist. The opening sequence to Metroid Dread, incidentally, introduces the first living Chozo in main series history. His name is Ravenbeak, and though Samus valiantly tries to defeat him, he is able to grab her by the neck and choke her with his hand. Yuko analyzes this Chozo dream with Jungian psychology. The Chozo in the dream represents the father. As she puts it, the old wise man is a manifestation of power and reason, as well as a symbol of authority. You want to rely on the Chozo's protection because you feel the sense of crisis, and conflict will diminish under the protection of the Chozo. The Chozo statues give you useful items. You can fight thanks to the Chozo statues. But now they won't let you. You have to settle it with your own power. This feeling of independence is building within you. Keep this in mind too, for the return to Metroid Dread. Aside from a final horoscope analysis, Yuko declares Samus to be a Scorpio and that she'll have a doomed relationship with a man, somewhat predicting Adam Malkovich's tragic fate. There's only one dream left. For a change, I'll read Samus's description of the dream. Dream 3. A bridge too far. I am approaching a bridge that I can't cross. However, my legs step onto it and the bridge breaks apart. It cracks and crumbles apart like sand. No matter how many times I get on it, it's useless. I am not allowed to cross. I am weak, so the bridge refuses to let me cross. Yuko recognizes this to potentially be a manifestation of anxiety. She then ties it, in classic Yuko fashion, to Samus's gender identity. Samus's, quote, courage in battle, unquote, is overwhelming her, quote, inner woman, unquote, which she must train further. Perhaps this analysis was driven by Metroid 2's ending, where Samus can only engage honestly with her femininity, with whatever sliver of maternal desire she has, only when she puts the gun down. Or maybe not. Either way, this dream struck me, mostly because this imagery reminded me of another 2D game with a trans-feminine protagonist. Celeste is a gorgeous game. Many have taken Madeline's attempt to scale a mountain as a metaphor for generalized mental health struggle. During this journey, she makes a friend, explores beautiful locations, and faces a dark version of herself who came from a mirror. The game's developer didn't begin writing it with a specific intent of making it a trans metaphor. Instead, that realization dawned on them years into working on the project. By the end of development, of course, lead dev Maddie Thorson came out as transfeminine herself. Trans reading of a work can be unintentional, and it can also be so completely obviously present in retrospect. The repeated battles with the darker mirror self being reframed as dealing with gender dysphoria, for example. But before all that, Celeste's prologue follows Madeline as she crosses a bridge. Like Samus, she can't cross it. No matter how fast she runs or how quickly she tries to get across, it falls apart below her feet, and Madeline starts to plummet. And then a little birdie appears. And Madeline makes the jump. The lesson here, of course, is that trans people can double jump. I know I can do it, and all of my friends can too. Dread keeps that promise, being the first game in the series to give Samus a standalone double jump upgrade before she gets the infinite space jump later on. Really, with the repeated bird ability gender metaphor, I couldn't ask for better representation, because it is one-to-one with my experience. I'm joking. In real life, trans people can triple jump. To return to the point, Metroid Dread explores Samus through gameplay in a much similar manner. While Madeline's permanent abilities only evolve twice, level design elements symbolically reflect parts of her personal struggle, such as the bubble or feather power-ups. The internal tension Samus faces is mostly present in her suit design. Keeping the traditional power suit, Varia suit, gravity suit upgrade scheme, the designs also reflect Samus's fears. The power suit in this game, sporting elements of Fusion's eponymous suit, has blue, sinuous, organic lines of what look like muscle crossing Samus's body. These are somewhat de-emphasized in the Varia upgrade. Samus once again sports her iconic orange and red color scheme, and the sinew changes to a subtler yellow color. She looks basically like Samus Aran, shoulder pads and all. It's almost easy to forget about Fusion. Metroid Dread refuses to let you forget about Fusion. There are a few key plot beats in Dread. One is the moment where Samus meets Quiet Robe, a peaceful Chozo from the same tribe as Samus's gay bird dads, Grey Voice and Old Bird. Quiet Robe kindly disables the Emmy remotely, and then sits Samus down to explain some details concerning series lore. First of all, clarifies Quiet Robe, the Metroids were created by the Thotha tribe, of which I am a member, for the sole purpose of wiping out the X, who were actually native to SR-388. This information, barring the detail of the specific tribe name, was also present in the 2003 manga. Hidden lore images in Samus Returns depict for the first time the arrival of the Chozo on SR-388. The X-parasites interfere with a barely explained mining operation, so the Chozo then create a genocidal bioweapon. Specifically making the Chozo into genocidal colonialists was certainly a bold move by Mercury Steam. Second of all, confirms the now confirmed eugenicist Quiet Robe, Ravenbeak is the leader of a distinct, second, military fascistic tribe of Chozo called the Mockin, who massacred us peaceful eugenicists to take our bioweapon for his own nefarious purposes. With me as sole survivor, as my tribe created the Metroids, we have the ability to control them. I was brought to this planet, ZDR, and Ravenbeak was ready to launch a full attack on SR-388 when an X-parasite made itself known. Ravenbeak successfully contained the invasion, though with great difficulty and mass casualty, but by the time he was ready to again capture more Metroids, you, Samus Aran, had already killed them all. Now, the only copy of Metroid DNA left in the galaxy is inside you, Samus. That's why he hacked the Emmy. Samus responds aloud in her native tongue for the first time in the series. Quiet Robe affirms that he's counting on her. It's a very cool moment, but it's somewhat undercut by Quiet Robe immediately getting killed by a robot Chozo soldier. This moment is followed up on a few hours later, when Samus finally discovers where Ravenbeak kept the X locked up. The entire area is sealed in by a giant pressurized door. Upon exploring and then leaving the area, Samus sees X-parasites fly out through it by the thousands. From that point in the game on, every single enemy in the game is now an X-parasite. From the tiniest fly to giant whales, they've all been replaced by X. Even Quiet Robe is now an X. When his body is absorbed by a parasite, he stands back up, eyes empty white like the SAX, and turns the Emmy back on. Dread now truly becomes a sequel to Fusion. 2D side-scrollers have always had an interesting relationship with the proscenium theater tradition. Many games in the Mario franchise use the imagery of curtains and the stage to draw attention to this. There are a multitude of similarities between these mediums. Both only have one angle to interact with their audience head-on. Both can also only really mostly play with X and Y motion. Moving an actor a certain amount of Z distance backwards eventually becomes impossible. The Samus reveal then can be reframed almost as a curtain call. It's the only time she collides with the fourth wall, dropping the character of the bounty hunter to instead present herself as herself. Adopting the curtain call then also draws attention to the performance of playing a game itself. Yes, Samus is a character, but from the moment you pick up a controller, you are also Samus. You aren't just watching her on stage. She only triumphs when you do. She fails because you failed. The performity of gender, then, becomes a fascinating topic. Many early games offered silent male protagonists that players of the target male demographic could easily project themselves into. To this day, Link from Zelda doesn't talk very much at all. Samus in her first appearance appeared to be yet another one of those protagonists. Silent, male, tough, a pretty cool guy who kills aliens and doesn't afraid of anything. It all comes crashing down, though, with that damn reveal. Sakamoto claims that the choice to make Samus a woman was made by random suggestion late in development, and passed by vote because they thought it sounded interesting. The agency in the performance then is pulled back towards Samus. Imagine whatever you want about her character. She can go home at the end of the day and stop performing, too. Dread, in being a return to the 2D Metroid formula, borrows elements of proscenium theater. It resists the urge to almost ever show that fourth wall. Even in cutscenes, the action is mostly side to side or cheated out towards one angle or another. Due to its polygonal art style, Dread had to drape much of the unseen parts of the scenery in black, as opposed to the more abstract cross-section-like diagram that many of the sprite-based games were able to get away with. Objects too far in the foreground are just that. They're not on stage anymore. There are no lights on them. They are not visible. The fights with Kraid and Ravenbeak in this game are exceptions, with arena-like floors extending past a playable area towards the player. This, too, adds to the theatrical nature of it all. Several reviews called the Ravenbeak fight the, quote, best final boss they've played in years. Samus's performance is your performance, first-person perspective or no. All this helps to draw the player in with Samus, as the game explores the final revelations it has in store. The final suit upgrade acquired during normal gameplay is the Gravity Suit. Unlike how the Varia suit seemed to reconfigure the design, the Gravity Suit just feels like more. Bigger shoulders, chunkier leg plating, it's metal atop metal, disrupting the natural flow her Varia design had. If this is meant to reflect Samus realizing her fear of becoming a machine, it certainly serves the part. Certain moments of the game have also reflected a bizarre change in Samus. Rather than killing a boss enemy and waiting for it to turn back into an X before observing it, Samus grabs it and shoves its head into the ground, arm glowing purple and fingers extended out like claws. This act of absorption somehow restores Samus's energy points. This violent attack is repeated on several of the other smaller boss fights that lead up to the Ravenbeak encounter. The strangeness of these moments are only met by Adam bizarrely telling Samus about how she's achieving her destiny. Finally, though, Samus reaches Ravenbeak's ship. Throughout the game, Samus has communicated with Adam through uplink stations scattered across ZDR. The coming twist was foreshadowed. Adam refers to Samus as Lady 3 times in the opening, but refers to her exclusively as Samus during the game. Either way, it all comes to a head at the final uplink station. Adam explains frankly what has been happening. Samus's new absorption powers are the result of her Metroid DNA. The Thotha genes stopped her from, quote, turning into a Metroid, end quote. However, Adam asserts that Samus possesses 2 sources of Chozo DNA, Thotha for Metroid control, and Mawkin for the physical strength she possesses. Seeing a Mawkin in person, the natural enemy of the Metroids, somehow, was enough to activate the latent Metroid genes within Samus, and the metamorphosis is now uncontrollable. Adam tells Samus she is now a Metroid. Her very existence is a threat to galactic security. But he assures her that she can still use her powers responsibly, if only she listens to what he says. By now, Samus has realized the twist too. Ravenbeak, still speaking through the voice of Adam, congratulates himself for allowing you to live, thus, quote, reaching your full potential, end quote. He states that his plan for galactic dominance is the only way forward and asks Samus to, quote, fulfill her destiny. This is an order. Disobedience will not be tolerated. Samus shoots the terminal, which melts away to reveal a decadent throne room. Upon finally meeting her face-to-face, Ravenbeak reveals the second twist in the span of 10 seconds. He's the donor of her Mawkin DNA. No, Samus, I am your father. The fortune teller called it 25 years ago. With that revelation out of the way, though, the fight kicks off. This fight is most comparable to the SAX fight. Both of you share a great deal of abilities, though the SAX fight was a brutal scrap, where this is more of a satisfyingly choreographed wrestling match. Developer interviews draw a straight line from the suit worn by the SAX, to the design of the final suit in Zero Mission, to the design of Samus's gravity suit in Dread. Ravenbeak is all of these things combined. He is your mirror in abilities using the items his people created that you've used in game after game. He is the Chozo warrior from the mural come to life, here to be defeated once and for all, and after a long, satisfying battle, he still grabs you by the neck and starts choking you to death. He declares his interest in controlling your Metroid DNA is gone. Instead, he'll clone you forever for his infinite army. Samus falls unconscious, her Metroid powers not strong enough to defeat him. Until, suddenly, they are. Flaring with bright light, Samus opens her eyes and her suit colors invert. The red of her helmet swaps with the green of her visor. Her whole suit is green now. Samus's Metroid powers let her drain the entire ship of energy. It crashes down to Earth, and we get a good look at Samus's new Metroid suit. This is it. All of the games have led up to this moment. Samus's monstrous femininity has finally been fully externally realized. She is no longer hiding anything. She can no longer be stopped by anything. She is finally an appropriate mother to her baby. She is a Metroid. She is unbelievably strong. Ravenbeak is infected by an X-parasite and merged with Kraid in a horrific, amalgamated, monstrous form. Samus kills this being with one shot. She doesn't even bother to absorb the X-parasite it reverts into, obliterating any trace of Ravenbeak instead to smithereens. She is Samus Aran, and she is the last Metroid, and she will not be in captivity. Samus makes her way through the traditional escape sequence, finally reaching her ship, but before she touches anything, is stopped by the voice of Adam, warning her that doing so will drain the ship of its energy. Samus turns around to see that the voice actually came from the X that had possessed Quiet Robe, who bows, reforming into its parasite form and intentionally getting itself absorbed by Samus. This somehow undoes the Metroid suit transformation, and Samus flies away from the exploding ZDR to an abrupt cut to credits. If the last Metroid is not in captivity, the galaxy will not be at peace. The unfortunate reality that the ending of Dread gives us is that the radical, beautiful power of the trans experience, of Samus's own thorny relationship with her own femininity, it's too much for the outside world to handle. She must become recognizable again in order to be identified within its systems. It is no wonder, then, that one of the first abilities the game gives you is the Phantom Cloak, allowing Samus to maintain perfect stealth through invisibility, with a mere potential cost of almost all of her energy. Dread's somewhat somber ending reminds us that Samus exists not just as a citizen of the Federation, but as a game character. It would be a perfect, fitting end if Samus just got to be a Metroid forever, and Nintendo has called this the end of the, quote, Metroid arc of her character. But there will probably be a next mission sooner or later, and that next mission needs a woman, not a monster, as its playable character, even if those two labels are interchangeable for Samus. Dread's queering of Metroid still fell within the expected boundaries. This is not a bad thing. The fact that the stealth sections aren't new don't take away from them being tense, fun sequences, but the real way in which Dread queers the recent Metroid releases is just by being unabashedly good. Not a team-based soccer spin-off, not a bizarre CGI nightmare, not limited by handheld technology or by being a remake, it's just a new Metroid game. And it's great. It throws you off guard with just that alone. It gets away with withholding the iconic Morph Ball for hours. Usually that item is unlocked within seconds of booting up the game. I do need to take a moment to say this, though. Dread's incredible quality was only possible due to its extremely talented staff, some of whom were not credited on the game despite working on it for months. In an industry where credits can be the difference between being hired or not, leaving credit out for arbitrary reasons, even when an artist's work is visibly in the game, is undeniably a bad move. More allegations since have come out about Mercury Steam forcing its employees to crunch, as well as grossly mishandling pedantic stay-at-home restrictions. The game is good. The employees are skilled. They deserve to be compensated for their work. Ideally, they'd be able to do the work without going through hell, too. Samus's legacy as a trans icon in gaming is muddy. Other characters, even Nintendo ones, have much more defined histories. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door and Super Mario Bros. 2 are both relevant here. Thousand Year Door prominently featured Vivian, who is textually a transgender woman in Japan, and Birdo from Mario 2 has been many flavors of gender nonconforming throughout the decades, but games like Captain Rainbow for the Wii do textually confirm at least one incarnation of her character is transfeminine. In contrast, the two official statements on Samus's transness are completely contradictory. On the one hand, there's the 1994 statement by Matsuoka. On the other hand, Sakamoto used this quote directly when talking about the possibility of a Metroid Prime port for the PlayStation 2. Paraphrased to remove the slur, which is still up on the official Metroid.jp Zero Mission website, by the way, it's roughly, actually, Samus is trans. Yeah, that's about how likely it is. Enjoy it on the GameCube. Well, Sakamoto, how about you enjoy this page I found that says GBA emulators work on the PlayStation 2, so, like, you can play every other Metroid game on the PlayStation. How does that feel? Doesn't feel great, if I'm being totally honest. Perhaps some of this is culturally lost on me. A year before Super Metroid's release, Shigesato Itoi, friend of Sakamoto and father of the cult classic Mother RPG series, produced a licensed Monopoly game called simply Monopoly. In it, a character named Midori uses the same term as Matsuoka to refer to herself. The same term is present in her description in the 1995 sequel, though the Monopoly game 2 also seems to dead-name her. Who knows? Maybe the confusion is part of the experience. By this point in the series, Samus truly is a biologically incomprehensible organism. In addition to being the human daughter of her parents, Ravenbeak's speech about DNA infusion finally confirms the details of everyone else she's a daughter to, biologically or not. She's a daughter via DNA to the confirmed eugenicist Thotha tribe Chozo Greyvoice, adoptive daughter of the Chozo Old Bird, and newly revealed daughter to Makan tribe space fascist Chozo Ravenbeak, on top of course, being daughter via DNA to the baby Metroid. The same baby Metroid, as you should recall, that Samus is also the mother to. As the classic song goes, she's her own grandpa. Where does this all lead? I can't say. Nintendo taught fans to seize every little bit of lore with both hands forever, because they certainly never let go of them. Almost every detail, even 35 years later, still traces back directly to the NES original. I think I'll instead take my lesson from the fortune teller. Samus is multifaceted and contradictory. Even on that page of the Super Metroid Player's Guide, Samus is presented through both deadly serious, deeply personal narration, and cute comic panels that take the weight out of the punch. Ariadne Yuko interpreted these dreams with every lens available to her, and when there were no lenses, she seized the characters with both hands, went with vibes. The vibes tell me Samus is cool, trans, gay. I like that for her. I don't think we'll ever get a game where Samus sits down on a chair and discusses gender dysphoria at length. If it's anything like how Nintendo tried to handle grappling with her PTSD, I don't think I want them to. But it'll always be a lingering point of reference for Samus in the back of my mind. Sarah Ahmed wrote about orientations. Metroid gameplay is the verb form of orientating, stretched into an explorable world where bodies and minds are more than their corporeal selves. To be able to orientate myself around a queer Samus is in itself an act of gameplay, of performance. Metroid games never wanted you to stop once you hit the end. The Samus reveal acted as an incentive for you to do the real work of the game. Not just discovering its world, but living in it, familiarizing yourself with it, sharing notes with whichever Metroid fans you can find, and getting close enough to every possibility in Xebeus that you can blitz through the game fast enough to discover Samus' secret. Next mission is whenever you want it to be. For me, next mission was this project. The real Metroidvania, then, is the friends we made along the way. And maybe that's enough. Thank you for watching. I am not going to remove my clothes if you watch this video faster.
propulsion sequence activated. Destination, planet SR-388. Warning, propulsion sequence activated. Destination, planet SR-388. Warning, propulsion sequence activated. Destination, planet SR-388. Warning, warning, warning.
Entering the atmosphere in T-10, 9, 8, 7,